Great stuff. How you doing tonight, Ash?
I'm good, yeah, you?
Yeah, pretty well. Pretty well. You've had a busy day on YouTube. I noticed you've put out several videos today on various matters. What's been your most successful video that you've put out today?
I'm not really sure, to be honest with you. What was Oh, there was the earlier one about Peter Wishart, who's managed to make an absolute idiot of himself once again. His latest tweet, which was picked up by Wings Over Scotland, shows him attacking not just unionists now, but also attacking independence supporters as well. Which absolute lunacy from a guy that only won his seat last time by 21 votes. And he's basically said that whether it's Albert, whether it's Labour, Conservative, Lib Dem, he said that they're all wrong to support the union. They're all backing Labour, but they shouldn't be backing Labour because the Labour and the Tories are as one, and Labour still has to promote its, I think his words were, the hard Brexit Conservative agenda over the rest of Scotland, and convince those people to vote for them. So, that guy, honestly.
Well, it's absolutely incredible that he is an MP, and he, as you say, he just barely scraped in as well, and he beat what would have been a good Tory candidate as well. It's ridiculous that a place like Perth, for crying out loud, has got somebody like Pete Wishart representing them. But what good thing about it is that they're all falling out like rats in a sack, or whatever the expression is.
Yeah.
The all under one banner people have got a march planned for the 24th of June in Stirling. And on the same day, the SNP have called a conference for all its supporters in Dundee, I think, actually, of all places, about Indy. So they're fighting against each other now about that, which is funny because that's going to take supporters away from the march, and so it's all good. It's all good to see all of that. And it was.
I think that's brilliant. Sorry, carry on.
Go ahead. No, go ahead.
I think that's brilliant. I think it really shows up the SNP and their true motives towards this. It's not about breaking up the UK. It's not about getting Scotland separate from the rest of the UK. It's simply about keeping their own taxpayer-funded lifestyles by trying to galvanise an ever-decreasing voter base, and that's what they're doing at the moment. If they really cared about independence, they'd invite people like the Greens, they'd invite the Alba Party, they'd invite the all under one banner people all to this one conference and galvanise the entire Yes campaign together, but no. It's just going to be them trying to promote themselves and trying to hang on to their seats, and that's what it's all about, and that's what it's always, in my opinion, been about.
I think you're right there. There was an article, a big interview actually, in the Herald on Sunday 2 weeks ago with one of the people who had been working for the Yes campaign during 2014, and of course we were told that the Yes campaign was a cross-party group of ordinary people, grassroots people in Scotland who were concerned for, democracy and for independence and all that kind of stuff. And this was an insider, somebody called Drummond, who I never heard of before. And he was interviewed at length saying that, on the contrary, the Yes campaign was very tightly controlled by the SNP. And the SNP did not want any other party muscling in on its action. And from the SNP's point of view, that's perfectly understandable. But what's surprising is that people actually would believe that it was anything other than that. It was obviously an SNP front. They were raising all the money for it. They were the spokesman for it. And that's always going to be the case. And it has to be the case because if they allow the grassroots to lead the independence campaign, you'll have this utter collection of William Wallace lookalikes. People living in the 14th century, rabid anti-English people, and just general fruitcakes. And so the SNP have to keep a lid on all of that, and they have to say, no, we're going to be the sole voice. So whether they like it or not, the SNP's always going to lead that cause.
Oh yeah, and they'll always have a voice as well, and they will always manage to galvanise a certain amount of support. But even if, like I heard you mention in the polls before, ever since Yusuf took over, it's been going even worse than when Sturgeon was in charge, and she managed to make herself pretty unpopular by the end. And ever since then, the polls are still dropping. What is it now? Something like 23 MPs are looking at losing. They're under attack from both sides, and even the latest poll that I saw had the Tories up 4 points in Scotland. Now, they're still well behind Labour and the SNP, don't get me wrong, but given that these seats that the Tories are looking to gain, although they would lose Moray apparently, they're still looking at gaining Angus, Argyll and Bute, Gordon, South, North and Perthshire. Sorry, South and North Perthshire and Perth itself. So that's a lot of seats to lose. And then Labour, as you said as well, are looking at gaining pretty much all the central belt. So they're going to lose. The only area the SNP have ironically tried to put money into is the central belt, because that's all they care about. But now they're looking at losing that as well. They're under serious pressure here, and although no one's talking about it at the moment, Yusuf himself is going to come under some serious pressure soon, because people are going to start worrying for their seats. They're going to start thinking, oh, I'm going to be out of a job soon if we don't get a new leader. But as you know, in the next 12 to 18 months, we're all going to be going to the polls for a general election, and they're all going to be very, very scared about losing their incomes and their taxpayer-funded lifestyles.
Mm-hmm. Yes. Oh, very much so. Very much so. And they are going to lose it. And a lot of these people, it's not like they can actually do very much else in life. You know, they landed on their feet. And it's fairly easy to become an SNP MP. You just need to join the local SNP branch and be somebody that's, you know, can string a few sentences together. And if you read the newspaper or something like that, you stand out. It's like, oh my goodness, this guy is incredible. So they put you up and you get elected. It's not like you have to really get elected on the strength of your own ability. You know, it's just
no, exactly.
It's just because you're using that party's banner. So it's an easy thing to do, and none of these people will get that kind of salary in the private sector, or not.
Never again.
Yeah, not even the public sector. They would struggle. Absolute sinecure.
I mean, look at Mary Black. She's younger than me. What's she ever done in life to warrant representing thousands of people in a constituency? And who's the other one? Is it Blackman? Is it Kirsty Blackman? Is that her name? I think she's younger than me. What's she ever done in life? What life experience do these people have? Really, absolutely nothing. Like you said, going into the private sector again and going into the real world like the rest of us and trying to earn a living, they've got absolutely no chance.
No, they're just quite good, gift to the gab kind of type people. You know, they can talk well, I think, and that's how they get noticed.
Like you said, they don't even need ability, do they?
No.
It's so easy, or it was in the past anyway, so easy to be elected under Salmond and under Sturgeon, because I suppose the cause, if you like, was in the ascendancy. But now that's all gone now. That's done. They've reached peak SNP, as it were, and now they're just on the decline.
Yeah.
So it's not going to be as easy anymore.
No, it's not. Unless, as I said, the Labour Party or the Conservatives give them something that will allow them to exploit again. Now, I was reading this, and I can just develop it a wee bit more, but I was reading this document by Gordon Brown and his so-called think tank on this matter. And basically, they are going to give more powers. They haven't specified what powers they're going to give, but they are going to give more powers to the SNP. But one of the things that they have specified is that they're going to make foreign policy something that is largely going to be devolved to Scotland as well. So again, that's a major international role that the SNP, and it will be the SNP, will be able to exploit. Now, you see, Gordon Brown thinks that, eventually Labour will be able to get elected somehow and exploit these powers and it'll be Labour that will be in charge. But, that's very much wishful thinking at the moment. The British general election is different from the Scottish general election. I don't know, but my own view is that the SNP and Greens are going to tend to dominate for a long while anyway. Lots of things are going to have to change, but the SNP and Greens will tend to dominate, and you need to plan for that, and then just hope, of course, that you win, but expect that you're probably not, at least for a while. And so when Gordon Brown says he's given these powers to people, what that means is he's given the powers to the SNP and the Greens.
Yeah,
that's what he's given it to. And so if you give these groups more power, they will use it against you. They're going to use this foreign policy. If he does devolve foreign policy, or large elements of foreign policy, what he's saying is he's going to allow Scotland to have its own trade commissioners and all that kind of stuff. Basically, giving it all to Scotland. That's weakening the British economy. It's weakening the cohesiveness of a British economy entirely. It's all bad. So he's going to do that. He's going to create a nationalistic Senate at the heart of the democracy as well, which is going to be a huge playground for the nationalists. A huge playground. The SNP are not even in the House of Lords at the moment. Okay, I don't know if people have entirely clocked that, but the SNP don't go to the House of Lords. So at least the House of Lords the SNP are at least absent from the second chamber in the House of Lords at the moment. But he's going to not only bring them in, he's going to centre them in there as basically the Scottish voice.
Look what happened in the Roman Senate. It'll be exactly like that, won't it? Eventually they all tore each other to pieces. And that's what'll happen here, isn't it?
Yeah, that's actually quite a good point. But the thing is, they'll bring us all down with them. That's the upsetting thing. They'll bring us all down at the same time. And so he's going to do all of those things. And I really need to write an article on that just to list it so people understand what all of this means. Because, he's capitalising on the idea, and that report's capitalising on the idea that people are fed up with British democracy. There's problems with it, and there absolutely are. And we're losing trust in politicians. We're all losing trust in politicians for a variety of reasons, not all of which are the same reasons that Gordon Brown's losing trust in politicians. But we're all losing trust in that area. So there is an issue there that needs to be addressed, but I'm not sure that Brown has got the answers. I mean, look at the situation with Suella Braverman, for example. I don't know if you've got an opinion on that. And what's happened with them trying to I don't know, what do you think they're trying to do to her?
They're trying to destroy her. This is another example, in my opinion, of Dominic Raab, Boris Johnson again. They keep going after them for different things, and Raab has now turned around and said that he's not standing in the next election. Personally, I don't blame him. I think he's been bullied out of his job under bogus charges, and now Suella Braverman is the next one, because she's the only one in that cabinet, I think, who can actually call herself a Conservative. She speaks on behalf of a lot more people than most of them inside Westminster, when she talks about illegal immigration, toughening up on it, stopping people bringing the dependents over here, stuff like that. She is a threat to Rishi Sunak, and she's a threat to Jeremy Hunt and people like that, because she doesn't believe what they believe, and the civil service also don't believe what she believes. But the civil service are probably happy with Rishi, who's more of a globalist anyway, and Jeremy Hunt, so they're happy to let them two carry on. But Suella Braverman, because she's outspoken, is now they're trying to slowly destroy her. And I think Rishi Sunak would have happily sacked her as well. But I believe he saw a backlash coming down the road. He's been told by people that if you get rid of Suella Braverman, who's one of the only true Brexiteers left in this Conservative Party, then we're going to rebel against you, and we'll make sure that you are brought down if you try and bring her down. And then I think she would be next in line, in my opinion, to take over the leadership of the Conservative Party if Rishi Sunak was gotten rid of.
Well, that's an interesting thought. Is the Blob afraid of her because she's a potential leader of
certainly,
the Tories?
She would be a proper Conservative leader. You know, I know she divides opinion, but she reminds me of a modern day Margaret Thatcher. She's a very tough woman. She's a strong woman. She knows what she believes. And a lot of people don't like that, I'm afraid. They just think you should just go with the mould. And a lot of politicians get into government and they're afraid to speak out against the civil service or speak out against their own party because they just want to climb the greasy pole and get the more glamorous ministerial job titles. I mean, she's got a big one anyway, hasn't she, in Foreign Secretary? But sorry, is it Home Secretary? But she will. She's happy to speak out, and she's happy to put her job on the line and speak out against Rishi Sunak, Jeremy Hunt, and the Conservative Party if necessary, because they're not doing their job. And whatever they're telling us, people like Jeremy Hunt, I wouldn't trust them as far as I could throw them. And if you look at the popularity ratings, neither would the public either.
Yeah. No, good point. And it just shows the power that they've got, along with the media, of just going after, picking people out one by one, and just making life so difficult for them that they have to stand down. And that's like a hidden government that we've got. And that's also one of the reasons why people are losing faith, because there's a feeling that the politicians often are not in charge, or at least they're not seem to be behaving as if they're in charge. And if they are, there's nothing that they can do. I remember talking to somebody who's very closely associated with politicians, who's an advisor for an MEP, as it happened. And he said to me that he had met a cabinet minister once in his life, and this cabinet minister had said to him, look, I'm sitting here in the office and I've got all the levers. The only problem is they're not connected to anything. And that seems like what these politicians are. They seem to have the levers of power, but the levers are not working, because once they start to crank them, then they find that there's these civil servants stuck in the cogs, and they're not allowing anything to move forward. And so
they just find work for each other, don't they? That's the problem here. They don't. How many civil servants have you known get sacked for COVID breaches, for attending parties in Downing Street, etc.? Not a single one. But of course, any conservative politician is dragged over hot coals. I heard a fantastic example the other day, and I forget his name now. The man who was in charge, he was First Lord of the Admiralty in World War II, and obviously we had a big navy then. And they had a certain amount of staff to run and make sure all the ships were fully manned and all the rest of it. In 1955, 10 years after World War II ended, he was brought back in to be some sort of consultant for the Admiralty once again. It turned out that we had next to no navy left, but the Admiralty had 3 times the amount of staff that it had during World War II. I mean, that just sums up our civil service and how many of them there are, and they really believe that although they're unelected, they believe they've got the right to dictate government policy ahead of the government of the day and the people that are actually elected by the people of this country. They've got far too big for their boots.
Yeah. I was thinking about that today, and I was like, well, what's the problem? And there's a couple of blokes who have identified a problem. One of them is David Frost, also known as Lord Frost, and he's got this article here. It's civil servants, not ministers, who run things. And that's I've been filing that. That's from last year, 16th of December last year, 2022. And he said something here which I thought was interesting. He goes, the truth is that our current arrangements are out of date. The Northcote-Trevelyan model for government dates from the Victorian era, when departments were a handful of people all drawn from the same small group of society. It needs change. And I thought, what's that Northcote-Trevelyan model? And then another article this year, the Brexit revolt against the Remain establishment has only just begun, by somebody called Alistair Heath. And he says that he's talking about Boris Johnson. He says he failed to smash the obsolete Northcote-Trevelyan civil service when he had the opportunity. And I thought, that's that phrase again, Northcote-Trevelyan. I'll add that to my Northcote-Trevelyan file. And so today I looked up, what's this Northcote-Trevelyan? And apparently it was the Northcote-Trevelyan report, was a document prepared by Stafford Northcote and C.E. Trevelyan about the British civil service. Commissioned in 1853 and published in 1854, it formed the basis for the principle of an impartial civil service. So basically, it's the model that the civil service has been getting run on since 1854. And we live in an absolutely different period of time now. And so I don't know what needs to be done to the Heathcote-Trevelyan model, I might say, but I think someone knows, and in which case they need to lay it out in detail what is to be done, and then the Tory government presumably needs to write out what they're going to do about it, and then put that in their manifesto, and then if they get elected, they need to do it, and they need to create a new model of a civil service. And I say that, I mean, I may as well be talking to the wind, which I possibly am, because the Tories will never do something as intelligent and as logical and as thought out as that. What will happen is they'll get elected, they'll sit about for 5 years, and then a month before the general election they'll go, we should have done something about the Northcote-Trevelyan system, but we couldn't even be asked to get round to it, quite frankly.
Yeah.
So that's, you can forget about that. But Labour will come in and they'll probably make it worse. So
yeah,
anyway,
even bigger. Yeah,
they'll make it even bigger because, of course, the public sector. And, of course, that's where the jobs for all the boys and girls can be found.
No, that's it, exactly. The only solution I could possibly think of, and I'm not sure it'd work, is if each government, when they came in, brought in their own people to run the departments. Obviously, it has to be people who've got the relevant qualifications, knew what they were doing, etc. And then at the top, you could have a few people like Simon Case and the rest of them, permanent civil servants, but just a handful of them over each department, and then the people actually doing the work, actually putting the policies forward, were people that belong to that party. And then maybe you'd get some sort of, if it was Labour, you'd get their agenda. If it was the Tories, you'd get a Tory agenda. That's the only way I could possibly think of it. But the current system is just doesn't work.
No, and I can't see how it can work, really. I said I don't know what needs to be done about it, but just this article here also popped up again by Alistair Heath saying the real reason the right lost, by which he means the Tories, and surrendered Britain to technocrats. And he says in it, he goes, the civil service must be reformed, and it's just what you've been saying here. Democratically elected politicians should be allowed to appoint hundreds of outside specialists, as is the case in France and America.
Yeah, that's right.
I didn't know that. The Home Office must be liquidated and a new ministry reconstructed from scratch. Ministers, I like this, need to hire managers who understand how to push through change. Quangos must be absorbed into ministries and no part of the government must be allowed to campaign against it. The blob thrives on bad or misunderstood legislation. So, yeah, bringing in people from the private sector who know how to make things happen. That's. I've always thought that. I've always thought it's ridiculous that you have, like, say, a health secretary who knows literally nothing about health, who doesn't know anything about that industry, and then you give him 6 months in the job, and then he has to go off and he becomes a defence secretary, and the guy's never so much as read a Commando comic, let alone got any idea about geopolitics or how missiles work or anything. So it's astonishing how we're still here today as a species, quite frankly. Anyway, if it was left to you and me, Ash, maybe one day it will be, who knows? But if it was, we'd get stuff sorted out. But we'd have to sort out the blob first, because none of the blob would want to work for us, that's for sure.
But you just raised a fantastic point there. Ben Wallace, fair enough, he's been in the military, so he's got a certain degree of understanding, but the rest of him have never worked in banking, but they become the Chancellor, etc., and all the rest of the other posts. Never worked in health, but they're a health secretary. That's probably half the problem. They're relying on these civil servants who've worked in these departments, and their dad probably worked in the department, and their granddad probably worked in there before them, and that they're just relying on them to give them all the information, and then, because they don't have any experience whatsoever, they've got to go along with everything they're told, and they've got no brains or knowledge or experience to question it, have they?
Yeah. That's right. Yeah. Well, I think I remember that was last year, Jeremy Hunt, who I think was the health secretary at the time, or whenever he was the health secretary. He said
a few
later,
years ago, wasn't it?
Yeah, he said later that people were writing to him complaining about what was happening to the granny or whatever, but he wasn't seeing any of the letters.
No.
They were all just going to civil servants who were not passing anything on. So he actually made a wee rule that every day he wanted at least one of those letters on his desk so he could at least see it.
The Tory MP, Andrea Jenkin, appeared yesterday, and I don't know if it was Talk TV or GB News, one of them. And she was talking about the civil servants, and she was saying how that when she was in, I think it was education briefly, when she was there, she said they hid things from her. She never managed to actually get meetings with people she wanted to get meetings with. Apparently she wanted to go and meet people like J.K. Rowling, etc., and she was barred from doing that. They literally tried to stop her doing anything. It's very Yes Minister, isn't it? And Yes Prime Minister. That's exactly what it really is. And they tried to stop her doing anything she wanted to do, and eventually she said it was so soul-destroying that she just left the department after a few months, because she just said, this is, you know what, I can't get anything done anyway. It's just ridiculous.
Yeah, absolutely. Ash, thanks very much for coming on the show. It's the top of the hour almost. As always, I suggest that people go and follow you on twitter.com/AKWriting88, and your youtube.com, which always does very well, is youtube.com/That Preston Journalist, all one word. And so, Ash, well said, Ash, says TC there. Thanks very much. Let's get you on again.
Yeah.
As soon as we can. We've got guests for the next couple of weeks at least, and at least 3 weeks actually, but we'll get you on after that sometime. Anything you want to say to the viewers just before we sign off?
Well, just thanks all for watching. I hope you've enjoyed it, and I'll be back on as soon as Alistair wants me back on.
Good stuff. Folks, check out Ash That Preston Journalist on YouTube.
Yeah,
Good night,
cheers.
Ash.
Thank you all. See you later. Bye-bye.